So, welcome back. It's Simon Phillips here with The Change Show and my special guest today, Rikki Arundel. And Rikki, we had a fantastic conversation in terms of your journey through this whole, what I would say has been a really emerging opportunity, if you like, for people to really embrace the breadth of talent that we have, because I think a lot of it was overlooked in the old days, or it was squashed because people weren't encouraged to just be themselves and bring their best self, if you like, to work every day. So tell me a little bit now about the work that you're doing with organizations. How does that break down? What sort of issues are they challenged with when they call you, and how do you help them with that?
I think the big point from what you were just saying there is this huge lack of understanding. And there's no question about it that I think with all diversity issues, once people start to understand, once they have spoken to somebody, I mean, I remember when I was at school, there was one black family in our town. And that was it. That was the only black family. It happened. One of them was in the same year as me, and I got to know him, and he was a really good friend. And as I grew up, my son was at school during the time of the Ethiopian crisis, and one of his best friends was black, an Ethiopian refugee. So he got to know about the lifestyles of that. Now, I didn't know anybody who was trans. People who were gay, certainly in the 60s, I mean, it was all illegal, so nobody would talk to anybody then. And then we got to the 80s, and of course, along came HIV with it, and everybody became utterly paranoid, didn't want to talk to people. And this, belief somehow that if you're even in the same room as someone with HIV, you were in trouble. And I think what people obviously don't understand is that the transgender community, particularly those that are rejected by family and friends, often end up in the sex industry as a way of survival. And if you're in the sex industry, then you're immediately open to all manner of STIs. And somebody said in Chicago, there was some research done, 80% of young trans people were HIV positive. So all of this starts to feed into the media, who pick up on it, and that then starts to lead to a lot of misunderstanding about what's going on. So I think the biggest problem of all with all LGBT issues is getting past that misunderstanding, helping people to understand that we're just ordinary people. Okay, so I was born, I don't know what exactly makes me transgender. All I know is that from all of the trans people I know, I've never come across anyone who actually got rid of it. They've always been transgender. They always were. They've maybe tried to suppress it, push it to the side. The same with being gay. People who are gay, it never goes away. And once we get that this isn't something that is ever going to go away, the only thing that can happen is you suppress it, you try to hide it, and it will come out. And of course, then you lead to the point. One of the reasons I came out was somebody who knew threatened to out me, and I wrote for a lot of the press, financial services press, and I thought if somebody controls me being outed, anything could happen. Yeah. So I can't stop somebody from doing that, but what I can do is preempt them. I can out myself, which is what I did. So I outed myself. So a lot of what's happening is about helping people understand. And some of the best feedback I've got from clients, the chairman of Fidelity International, I did a TEDx talk for them, said, first time I fully understood what this is all about. So that's the talent and the skill I think I have, is I've always had this ability to take a quite complicated issue and make it easily understandable.
And I know you do a lot of work, don't you, around storytelling as well.
And stories work.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were saying to me last time we spoke about the fact that people don't actually embrace the fact that we all have biases.
My early career was marketing, and what happened was about 10 years ago, somebody said, could you use some unconscious bias training for us? And I said, well, yeah. I had no idea what unconscious bias training was.
Yes. What was the question again?
So I looked it up and I thought, oh, right, okay. Fine. I started looking. I thought, okay, I understand bias now. And then I discovered the Harvard Implicit Association test. And if you just look up Harvard Implicit Association test, there's a whole demo set of tests that you can do to check your bias. And what it's doing is looking for micro differences in the timing between your reactions, switching backwards and forwards. So it does it in such a way to remove bias from your responses, but identify if you've got a bias because of it takes just that fraction of a second longer to answer the question where you've got a bias and so you can't cheat it. And I discovered I was actually quite biased towards men and career, women and family.
Okay.
And not only me, but it actually turns out that most women have the same bias. Most men have the same, because we're brought up in a culture where most of us have seen movies where dad goes to work and mum looks after the house. We probably grew up in a house where it was the same thing, because mum sacrifices her career, looks after the kids, and then tries to go back, but ends up with a lower career. And a lot of the reason for inequality is because women take on caring roles and such like, and men are allowed to carry on building their careers. One of the things I noticed straight away as I changed gender was how differently I was being treated, not because I was transgender, but because I was now identified as female.
Right. Okay.
So all of a sudden there was an assumption that I probably didn't understand complex issues as well as men. That my point of view at a meeting was probably not as important as a man's issue view, and just little things all the time were going. And of course I became more and more aware of the way in which women adapt to the fact that they will be treated as second. So I think that helped me enormously, and that's part of some of the work I do with organizations, is trying to help them to understand just exactly and that brings us to stereotypes. If I have a belief in a particular stereotype about the way women are, I remember the Guerrilla Guide for Working Women I saw when I was in my literature, and rule number 1 was if you can type, make sure that becomes your secret. Nowadays, of course, we all have to type, but this is in the days before everybody was on computers. If you start to, and I've seen it happen so many times. Everybody walks into a room, can you handle the coffees there? And immediately it's the woman who's expected to get the teas out and get the and it's those sorts of things which I then started to experience. So although I'm dealing with bias around gender, transgender issues, it's actually often the fact that the bias is about me being treated as a woman, which means that I will be treated as second class or a second rate. Not all the time, but it surprised me when I did this implicit association test just how biased I still am. I did the test again recently and found that it has actually now equalized quite well.
Okay.
I also, and because I'm conscious of it, and that's the first thing everybody has to recognize, that we're all biased. My job as a marketeer was to make you biased. I don't want you to walk into a shop and think, oh, I've got 10 varieties of beans. Which one shall I have today? No, I want you to go blue, Heinz. Yeah, that's it. Utterly and completely biased in favor of Heinz, because we've never tried anything else, because it's the only one we believe in. And that's what marketing does. And if you look around at so many things, I did some race training with Jane Elliott, the brown-eyed, blue-eyed woman. She did exercises to get kids to discriminate against each other on the basis of brown eyes and blue eyes, because there were no black people in Iowa. So she's used that to randomly get people discriminating. And she found very quickly it moved from discrimination to bullying and intimidation. The moment you determine to a group of people that this group is less than equal, this group is not okay, everybody will start to pick on them. Yeah, but equally with youngsters, you can turn that around 180 degrees quite quickly if they understand more. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They do understand, and these kids really did understand it, and it started to really to work, and it's helped me because when you walk into a room and suddenly I had this experience. I went into, I was in the toilets at an event, and if you've seen my little humorous thing, you'll see this is one of the Stale Hotel. I saw the women clocked me, and I knew they had. I saw the second glance, the little whisper. Oh, it's a transgender over there or something. Anyway, I went to the toilets, and they followed me in, not realizing that's where I'd gone. And they were still talking about me as they walked in. Well, I just think it's not right. In New York, they've got special toilets for transgender people now. Oh. And they quite literally, one sat on one side of me, one on the other, and had a conversation about the rights and wrongs of trans people while I'm sitting at the kitchen. Absolutely crazy. But the comment, she said, well, you just don't know what to say, do you? And I thought, that's the key.
Yeah.
People just don't know what to say. Am I going to say something wrong? So much of what I do when I'm doing workshops is to get people to start to understand the language, to have a conversation with someone who's transgender, to start to realize actually most of the time, if you get it wrong, that's fine. Yeah. If you get my pronoun, if you say him or she, I'm just going to say no, they. My preference used to be she, so I'd probably stick with that. I don't worry too much about it. If somebody gets it wrong once or twice, then I'll remind them. The problem is if they keep on saying he, because they have a decision made in their head. No one can change their sex. No one can change their gender. If you're born male, you are male. That's it. I'm going to treat you as male. Well, sorry, you're breaking the law now. Mm-hmm. That becomes harassment.
Yeah.
To understand that once you cross that line and you are purposely doing something because you have taken a view that I do not believe that this person is I don't believe that they can change gender. I don't believe they're going to do it. Well, we have some laws. And we put those laws in place, which actually said people will be treated with respect. And that's the fundamental principle of all equality law. Treat people with dignity and respect. And
I think you're right that most people absolutely want to do the right thing and say the right thing and make people feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Most people are in that block. And then, as you say, you have some that they don't care whether you're comfortable or not. It's still their belief and they wish to express it.
And yeah, that's been a battle. We've got some people who have a religious view that, homosexuality is illegal. Well, fine. But if you want to run a bed and breakfast, then you're going to have to accept gay and trans and all other people coming in. You can't say, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. Those days are over.
Yeah.
Now, there are people who've insisted, I have a religious belief, they can't come in. Well, fine. Run something exclusively for your religious group then. That's it. You can do that. But what you can't do is say it's open to everybody except you and you and you. And that's where we've got this. Now, I think one of the things I try to get people to understand is that most people haven't experienced, or maybe they have. You've probably experienced sometime you engage with somebody and it's quite clear they don't like you. It may be somebody you've had some disagreement with, or somebody that you just. And if you don't like, or if you don't like someone, and this will happen. There's just somebody who, their particular manner and everything else you find obnoxious. You think, no, that's it. So what will happen is if you're in a customer servicing environment and you come across someone you really don't like, you will do things like less eye contact. You will shorten the sentences. You'll be very quick and abrupt. You'll try to get rid of, deal with it as quickly as possible. You might even try to avoid them, cross the street and go somewhere else. Now, these are all conscious or even sometimes unconscious behaviors that we automatically do when we meet someone we don't like, or when we come across someone who makes us feel very uncomfortable. And that's the signs of bias. Now, because I'm transgender, because I occasionally come across people who are very uncomfortable, I've learned to recognize it. You see it straight away and think, oh, they don't like me. And I have black friends who said the same thing. They walked into a store and being totally ignored because it was an upmarket store. Good. How could they afford to shop in here? And that's the sort of attitude coming across.
Wow.
And it will happen with young people who happen to be goth, or they walk into a store and everybody's, oh God, I don't like them. There's a street in Hull where most of the shops are now run by people who've migrated to the UK from the Middle East or areas around there. Quite male dominated, run by men. Often there are groups of 3, 4, 5 men just hanging around in groups down the street. I turn onto the street and look down there and think, no, I'll cross the road. I know I'm being biased. I know that's probably somebody could say that's racist behavior, but yeah, groups of men hanging around as I'm walking down the street, that's very uncomfortable for me, in exactly the same way and I watch most women cross the street. They'll walk down the other side of the street because that particular road is just too uncomfortable. And it's those sorts of things that people have got to, it's recognizing, okay, fine, I do that. So when somebody comes in and they look like they might be the image of the Muslim terrorist that I've seen on TV, and suddenly somebody walks in with the beard and the head, oh my God, looks like a Taliban. And because it's in the news, because we're hearing it, we've built up a bias automatically. So we have to stop that and think, okay, I need to deal with this. And the only way to deal with it is improve your understanding, get to know better.
And I come back to how you help people inside organizations do that, go through that process and deal with it better. But I just wanted to go back half a step, because I notice your pronouns are they and them, and you did say that previously you'd been she and her. So talk us through that evolution, because again, I think this may be an area, I see it much more in the US. There are lots of people who are including their pronouns in their profiles on LinkedIn, etc. And it's starting to emerge here in the UK as well. But it may still be an area that confuses people. So
I think
if you're saying you're a woman, why they them in that sense?
Right. So when I changed gender 20 years ago, the option of non-binary really wasn't there. And it's a much more difficult option. Because everybody expects the world to be divided into if you're not a man, you must be a woman. If you're not a woman, you must be. So I remember going to see my daughter, who was about 15 at the time, and she phoned me up and she said, Dad, still calls me Dad. She said, Dad, if you come as a man, that's cool. If you come as a woman, I can just say you're my aunt. But if you come somewhere in between, that really gives me a problem. And this is the issue that, who was that you were with? Were they gay? Were they man? Because nobody can now place me and put me in the box. That means anybody associated with me has got the same problem. And what we've got now is a situation where increasing numbers of people, current estimate are between 250,000 and 500,000 people in the UK now identify as neither male nor female.
Okay.
My issue with it is we don't have a new word. We haven't got something that's alternate. It's either man, woman, or not a man or a woman.
Right.
Non-binary is not saying what you are, it's saying what you're not.
You're not.
So you don't, and that's, I think the problem with our language is we haven't managed to evolve a word. It's like the pronouns. We're using they, them as the plural pronouns, which are in English, are non-binary. Much bigger problem in France and Germany, where I'm doing some work at the moment, because so much is gender. Everything has a gender. Everything, every word is la or le, or so because of that, it's become a bigger problem over there. But here now, some people say, oh, you can't use plural ones. Well, yeah, you can. If somebody's left their hat, let's put it in the foyer for them. We will use the word them if we don't know the gender of the person we're speaking about, and it's singular. We automatically use they, them. So all we're saying now is just apply it a little bit more, just broadly use it, so that you talk to somebody who is neither male nor female, or if you're not sure, because it may not be clear. Most people will handle they, them as comfortably. If you don't know, it does take a bit of time to get used to it. My partner is identified as non-binary before I did, and I struggled, partly because I'd known them for 7 or 8 years before they changed to non-binary, and can't shift it. My family, who knew me for 50 years as he, still struggle to make it she. However, a lot of the work I've been asked to do is to go in where staff are not getting it, can't shift it, are not handling it, and to try and find ways to help people to get used to it. Just simple little things that you could do.
Tell me a little bit more about that then, because I would imagine if, let's say you're a manager of a team or leader of a team and you've got 15 people in your team, and if there is a range of pronouns being used, you're probably running the gauntlet every day, aren't you, in terms of worrying about it. If you are somebody that is concerned that you don't upset people, you might be inadvertently saying the wrong thing, or and does it take long to adapt if you've got a number of people in a team?
If you've got somebody who is non-binary and they remind you, and this is what I do, I just say it's they, they, them. So if people get it wrong, and a lot of the time I just ignore it. If it's an engagement with somebody I'm probably not going to see again, then I'll just let it go. And often people hear my voice, that's it, he, and that's the end of it. I think this is a one-off engagement. I'm not going to play with it. If it's someone I'm likely to be engaging with on a regular basis, I will remind them. And I'll also remind them if they use the wrong pronouns for somebody else.
Yeah.
So if in a conversation they refer to somebody and they say she, I'll say that's he. Sorry, so yeah, it's he. They identify as he. Oh yeah, and the more people hear non-trans people, or people refer, picking them up on I was talking about somebody else, the better it is, and they start getting used to it. So it's just, more than anything else, I think everybody has to play a role in just calling it out when somebody's wrong. It gets more complicated when there's not just an unconscious bias, but what I've called a hidden prejudice, where there's an underlying prejudice and people don't want to do it. They, like I refuse to acknowledge this person as, and I don't understand why that is. Unfortunately, too often, sex comes into it. And I don't mean sex in the terms of male or female, sex in the terms of this person's identifying as female and I might accidentally fancy them, and that would make me gay, and I don't want to feel as if I'm gay. That's the logic or illogic that goes on, is somebody saying, and I think we've got to get past this very, very quickly. I do hear it occasionally. I remember being on a bus when somebody came on and started chatting me up. So I spoke, oh God, you've got a bloke's voice. And I said, oh, I wouldn't fancy you with a voice like that. I said, well, I don't fancy you either. So let's just end this. And that's where where the problem is starting. It's this, I want you to conform to my ideal of a woman I might fancy.
Yeah.
I don't, and therefore there is a problem. And trans people have been beaten up for a lot less than that. 20th of November is Trans Memorial Day, where we will remember probably 200 to 300 trans people around the world who've been murdered just because they were trans. So that the underlying uncomfortableness with somebody changing gender is global, and it's a real difficult problem. So more than anything else, it's just I need to encourage people to call it out wherever they hear it. Whenever somebody gets it wrong, call it out.
And I'm guessing that's one of the things that you say when you're starting to work with organizations that are trying to create a more inclusive environment. Yeah. So any other top tips for a leader out there who's tuning into this and wants to get started on this journey of improving the inclusivity in their workplace?
You're not going to tack. I mean, I go in and do a workshop, and I will do quite a lot. I will move things quite quickly, and then it will slide back because people slide back to what they're doing. So the point about changing behavior is that you don't just do it with a one-off course doesn't do it. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
So things like, if you've got an LGBT employee resource group, BRG, around, that helps because they start putting out information. But the most important thing, I think, is self-education. I would always recommend to any organization, if it's about LGBT and non-binary, trans inclusiveness, get involved in any local community activities that are involved. So sponsor the local trans LGBT support group. They're always desperate for cash. It's difficult to get funding these days because there isn't around. It's an enormous amount better if a corporation goes, even a couple of £1,000 going in to help them, helps pay for their rent for 3 or 4 months, and raises their profile. They will put your notice up to say we're being supported by such and such an organization. That starts to go out. That means the community then starts to get the word that, oh, this is a LGBT supportive organization. And then you can get involved in pride events. In, the week before the Trans Memorial Day is Transgender Awareness Week. And that's an international awareness week. So from the 13th to the 19th, what can you do in your organization to actually raise awareness of transgender issues? Can you support something local? Can you be involved? Can you run something online? Can you do get somebody in to do a transgender history lesson? There's all sorts of things that cost very little that an organization can do to encourage people to improve their education, get more involved, just get to know people. And I found that more than anything else, just getting to know people in a minority community starts to get rid of a lot of the issues.
Fantastic. Love it. Love it. Listen, Rikki, we're going to have a quick break and going to come back, and I'd like to, a couple of things. I'd like to get an experience from you, if you like, a significant change that happened in your life and how did you deal with it? Because we find the personal stories really help people who are tuning in. And then also, I'm going to ask you if you've got a track that you listen to that is either associated with that or just pure inspiration from your perspective. So we'll have a quick break and then we'll come back and keep chatting.
Okay.
Welcome back. It's great to have you here. I'm joined by Rikki Arundel. We've had a fascinating conversation that I hope for those of you who are listening to this, get an idea that actually it's really simple and straightforward to get more involved, to start to open up the minds of the people around you and actually just make a little dent. Sometimes that's all it takes, is a dent in somebody's stuck thought processes to get them to move and to shift and to go out and find out more for themselves. So Rikki, I really appreciate the time you spent with us talking about that. So tell me a little bit more about you then. Is there a time in your life, a specific time, there was a change going on that was significant for you, and you maybe struggled with that, but how did you get through it?
There've actually been quite a few through my life where I completely changed direction. Most of them I was able to pivot. Obviously, when I changed gender, that was a big shift. It took me 5 years to redirect my entire life. But the most recent one probably has affected so many people, of course, was lockdown and the COVID issue. Now, for the speaking industry, that meant our entire industry just came to a standstill. We just fell off a cliff. I'm in the business of attending meetings, and all of a sudden there were no meetings, and we just sat back with absolutely no work, nowhere to go, not knowing what to do. Zoom was there, but nobody really was quite sure how they were going to use it or what was going to happen. And I think more than anything else, the speaking community came together through the Professional Speaking Association, the PSA, which obviously I've been very connected with as having set it up. And suddenly we started to work and look at what we could do with this online platform. And here we are now, nearly 2 years on, and most of us are now beginning. I think most of us in this business have now got the hang of it. We know how to create a very small, inexpensive studio and present ourselves professionally. The massive growth in podcasts, which you've joined in on, because we have had that ability. Now, what's interesting is we're now moving towards everything reopening, and everybody's saying, yeah, we're going to be back in the room. But what's happened is I just got the details of a meeting, which I know is going to be in the room at the end of next year. And the price tag is 4 or 5 times the online equivalent.
Yeah, has to be.
And so you think, whoa. So and I started to look at it and thought, well, if somebody wants me to go and actually do an in-person presentation, I have actually got to think about the fact that I can normally do 2 or 3 events in a day now online. If I have to travel to London on the train and then stay overnight, and I've lost 2, I'm losing an enormous amount of work. So I have to consider that, I've got to think about my travel time is actually now got to be charged at some rate. So that's making me really think hard about the way in which we move forward. I don't quite know how it's going to move forward. And I think we've had that change of adapting to doing stuff online. I still get very annoyed when I see people are terrified of Zoom. And that's mostly because, again, lack of education. They haven't spent the time to upskill. And this is the same as we were talking about earlier on with, if you need to get to know how to engage better with the Muslim community, with the Black community, with trans, it's self-education. Find out, understand. There's Black History Month, there's Trans History Month, LGBT, all these periods during the year are there. Well, now we've got this shift about how do we engage online. It's got to be the future. It makes so much more sense. I've got to know so many people I've never physically met.
Yeah,
it'd be nice when I do meet them, but I think this is an area where we've got to start to look carefully and start to think about making sure people have the skills so that we can do the training and be as effective, if not more effective, by doing it online. And then treat the big events when we all get together. Okay, we know that's not just an event, that's a social event. You're gonna have a dinner, you're gonna be meeting. And so you just think about that and think, right, this is going to be expensive, so how do we make it really special? Training, how do we just make it professional? How do we make sure that people engage, can get the information they want? So I think we've got a year now of really rethinking how do we make meetings much more effective by mixing between online, offline, maybe some hybrid, and that complex mix which we're going to come about. But we need to work on it. We need to really, really educate and train ourselves to make it better.
So what I heard there in terms of the way you've worked through this change is that you've educated yourself, if you like. So it was the change itself was a fear of the unknown, what's going to happen, and actually you've worked through it through just researching. And
I was terrified about just speaking to camera, and I'm still struggling to actually remember to talk to the camera instead of the person on the screen, which I think we all do. But no, I spent a lot of time. I probably spent every week 3 or 4 hours every week I devote to simply improving my ability of being online. I used to bob about really, really badly. I've calmed myself down. So there's lots of things I had to learn. And still I go to meetings and they're appalling. I think, oh, please. Just put a light on somewhere, just do something to make this look better. So there's lots to learn. We're moving forward into a new world.
But there's always teething problems, aren't there? Right? And it's about relaxing into it, I think. But because I can remember do you remember when we went from acetates to PowerPoint? And but just as people were getting really slick with the acetates, we went to PowerPoint and it all looked rubbish again. I think we've got to get through that process and not let it hold us up. We're going to learn, but it's about how quickly we can learn, isn't it?
Yeah, but I like the idea of a change is the only constant in life. Having to rethink everything and look at it and think, right, well, what I used to do, I can't do now. What can I do instead? So sometimes it's not about just trying to say, how can I move what I did online? No, how can I achieve the objectives I wanted to achieve online? Do we do it from a completely different angle, to a completely different perspective? And let's play with it. And I now run a regular weekly meetings for speakers where we just get together and talk about how we're changing. What can we do? How can we play and adapt? And that's what you've got to do. Just got to find ways, put a little bit of time into education.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for that. I've got one last area to explore with you, which is finding a musical theme song almost to some of the changes that maybe gone on in our lives, or a particular moment when it was just there was something about the music that just enraptured you, if you like. So is there a song or a track that you can identify that we can share and reminds you of something like that?
My first job was working for an insurance company in the city of London, and I very quickly discovered just down the road a small record shop run by somebody who was quite flamboyant, a boy who occasionally wore nail polish and and makeup, and I didn't fully understand it, but I really got on with Nigel. And if he's still around and listening, I lost touch with him. But he every month when I got my paycheck, first thing I would be doing is straight down to the record shop. It was Harlequin, eventually a Harlequin record shop, and he would say, "Try this, try this, try it," and pull out various records. Well, the record which blew me away was David Bowie's "Man Who Sold the World," because there on the back cover was David Bowie on a chaise lounge in a dress, and I thought, oh, I was dead, totally, completely in the closet. No one knew, even Nigel never knew, but I had to buy the record, and so I became a big David Bowie fan. And then by 1972, he launched the Ziggy Stardust program, and he was performing at the Rainbow Theatre in Finsbury Park, at the Rainbow Theatre Odeon. And I just had to go there. And that was my first introduction, I think, to the incredible multicolored world of LGBTQ. We were just, we were still emerging. It had only been, homosexuality had been decriminalized in 1967. We were only 5 years into that. It was still a mix, and there were people wearing, there were guys in pinstripe suits with high heel shoes and pearls and makeup, and girls in chiffon dresses and Doc Marten boots. It was just such an amazing array, and I just went to that concert, the first Ziggy Stardust concert, and absolutely blew me away. Lindsay Kemp and all that stuff. So to pick a single track is quite difficult. The record which keeps coming to mind is 5 Years, because that's the one which he opened up with, and it was an absolutely brilliant record. But the whole Ziggy Stardust album is one that just has stuck with me. I absolutely loved the whole album, everything on it. Yeah, it's helped me along through my life. I just absolutely loved what David Bowie did to transform attitudes towards people and gender.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for being our guest today. I'm sure that you've done a lot to help people's education along just a couple of steps more. And as we said earlier, that can sometimes be all that's required to create a revolution, is just, somebody having one new thought. So thank you for that. But also thank you for explaining to us how we can help some of this thinking take hold inside organizations as well, because if organizations can get behind this and, as you say, make a dent in their communities, then this issue will be history in itself, and that would be fantastic. And
people will just give so much more of themselves when they feel safe in an organization.
Definitely. Thank you, Rikki. It's been a pleasure, and I'll hopefully catch up with you again soon when we can actually get out of these technological boxes and have a good meeting. So look after yourself, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks, Simon. Been a pleasure.
Brilliant. So that was the Change Show with Simon Phillips and my special guest, Rikki Arundel. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again next week. Take care.